Hello and welcome back to my channel. In this video, I will be walking you through how I made this Poptart shaker card. For this card, I used my Cricut machine to cut out the pieces shown. I have 3 scalloped rectangles with rectangles cut out of the center, 1 full scalloped rectangle, 1 rounded corner rectangle, and then my card base. I also have a piece of acetate that will fit the window. Starting with the first panel, the cream colored rectangle, the one that will be the base of the Poptart, I want to ink blend around the edges with brushed corduroy Distress Oxide ink, just to make it look toasted. This video is sped up about 4 times the speed, I think. No way I can blend this quickly, but it would be nice if I could. Also, I'm ink blending on the oven silicone mat, and I do this because it's actually fairly easy to clean up, and the brush glides really well on it. Now that my ink blending is finished, I am going to attach my cream colored card panel onto my card base using some liquid glue. You can use whatever glue you like here. I just like to have some kind of wiggle room. Now I take my scissors and trim off the edges of the card base, as it is not rounded. I had attempted to use my envelope maker. It has a little rounded edge cutter, but the edges didn't really match. Now I'm lining up the chocolate frosting base piece with one of the frames. I want to put them together so that I can heat emboss what looks like sprinkles over the top without there being a break in it. Here I'm using my anti-static powder tool so that the embossing powder doesn't stick to places I don't want it to. And this is the Emboss It pen from Ranger. It's just clear embossing ink. I just make little dashes here and there to look like long sprinkles. I don't want to fill up the area just yet because I plan on doing multiple colors of embossing powder. Now that that's done, I grab my coffee filter and my white embossing powder from Ranger. The coffee filter is to catch the extra so that I can put it back in the container. As you can see on my desk, I did not do a very good job of catching the embossing powder this time. For that kind of mess, I find that the Swiffer dry mop cloths are very effective at getting all those little particles up, as you're about to see here. Nice and clean. Off camera, I had my heat tool warming up. Here, I'm just melting the embossing powder. All you're looking for is to melt it from a grainy texture to a smooth finish. You don't want to leave the heat tool in the same spot too long because it will actually burn your paper. Also, if you find your paper is warping too bad in one direction, you can heat it from the other side and it'll help even it out a little bit. Here, I'm lining up my frame to make sure that the sprinkles that were both on the outline and the back piece are lined up again so that I can add my new color of sprinkles. I do this multiple times until I have the desired effect. Next is this pretty yellow color from Nouveau called Happy Days. The process is the same with each color. I have 5 colors in total. If I notice any spots look a little bare or like I didn't add enough of a certain color, I just go back in with my embossing pen, make a little line, and then add the embossing powder before I heat set. I think it was here where I forgot to show the rest of the embossing powders. This particular one is from Recollections brand. It's called Glacier. I also use Ranger Blue, Ranger Windy Vecchi, Pink Peony, tiger lily, and red geranium. This next one will be the Windy Vecchi and Ranger pink peony color. Right here is when I noticed that I really loved the colors that I already had for the sprinkles. The only problem was I had already pre-mixed my sprinkle color, and I didn't really feel like digging out each individual color. So I stuck with my original plan. But I think next time I might try the white, pink, light blue, and yellow color combo. It's very pretty. The sprinkles that I'm going to use for my shaker elements I made using polymer clay, which is an oven-baked clay, and a clay extruder. I had just made a bunch of thin canes of different colors of clay, oven-baked them, and then snipped them apart into little sprinkles. If you don't have the supplies already to make your own sprinkles, multiple craft sites do have them. You can even get little round ones and heart ones and all kinds of different things. Alright, I'm on my last color now. This will be red, and then after that I am done heat embossing sprinkles. I do take the Swiffer dry mop cloth over my paper where I had all the anti-static powder tool. It helps clean it up. Here I'm using 1/8 of an inch score tape along the back of the very top sprinkle panel, and I am putting it around the edges in order to attach the acetate. This will be my window for my shaker. Now you're watching me remove the acetate, and that is because I did not have it far enough up. Luckily, because it's acetate, it did not stick to the score tape as much as it would have if it was just regular paper. So I peeled it back and I added liquid glue to help it stick again. And now I'm taking liquid glue and I am going to attach all of the frames together. I'm using liquid glue here for the same reason I usually use liquid glue, and that is just so that my placement at first doesn't have to be the most accurate, because I can wiggle the paper around a little bit and get it to line up right. Here I'm figuring out where I want my sentiment. This particular sentiment is from the Simon Says stamp set Ornate Love. I'm going to heat emboss my sentiment on the acetate. This acetate is heat resistant, which doesn't mean it won't melt, but it will take a little bit more to melt it. I'm using my anti-static powder bag over the acetate to keep the embossing powder from sticking all over it. I'm also using my Versamark clear ink pad to stamp the sentiment. Off screen, I have my heat tool warming up. I do this so that the amount of time the plastic has to be under the heat tool is reduced. I contemplated using red embossing powder and then switched it out for the white. The white is the exact same white that I used for the sprinkles. Now you will see there are lots of little flecks of embossing powder that I should have wiped off before I heat set it, but I didn't. So off camera, I actually completely redid that whole acetate sheet. Now I am using my 1/8 inch score tape again to line one of the frames. I'm going to sandwich the acetate sheet between the top frame and the bottom frames. I will also use liquid glue for this. When you're using score tape, it's a good idea to have a bone folder or the edge of your pokey tool or something to rub down the edges of the score tape to keep it from pulling up when you remove the backing. So while I have time, while I am adding my glue, I would like to ask you all a question. What is your favorite Pop-Tart, or do you even like Pop-Tarts? I think they're super cute, but I personally do not enjoy eating them. I'm wiping clean my acetate with my Swiffer dry mop cloth again. This just gets rid of any dust or loose embossing powder flakes or anything that was on it. I also added something heavy on top of it for a few minutes to help keep the pieces together. Now I'm adding little bits of foam tape, trying to make sure that I don't poke any outside of the frame itself. So like the little scallops. It was a little bit of a challenge. It took a few minutes, but eventually I got it covered. It's important that you don't leave any gaps in the foam tape. If there are gaps, then your sequins or other shaker bits will fall out. Another thing you can use if you do not want to use foam tape is craft foam, and you can put double-sided adhesive on both sides and then stick it together. The only thing with this is you have to cut it out the same shape, or roughly the same shape as the shaker window. And because I used the Cricut for mine, I could not cut craft foam. I guess the Cricut maker might be able to do that, but I don't own that. Something else you can use instead of foam or foam tape are multiple layers of paper. I don't really think I would recommend it for this particular card because there has to be so much space, but if you use something like glitter, you can just do multiple layers of paper that are cut the same. Glue them all together and then glue them to the card base. Something I forgot to do before I took the backing off of all the foam tape is to run my anti-static powder bag along the sides of the tape and the acetate sheet. This will just help keep my sprinkles from sticking to everything. I recommend doing this before you take the backing off, not after. I just got carried away. Now that I have all my sprinkles in my window, I am going to attach the back piece. This took me a minute. I didn't use any liquid glue and I really didn't want to get it off center. I waited to press it down until I was sure that it was centered. Make sure you press around the edges where the foam tape is to make sure that everything is stuck down properly. I decided to go ahead and put the sentiment inside of the card. The top says, "Love you." The inside will say, "With all my tart." My previous Pop-Tart card said, "I love you with all my tart," and it was on the front. This particular card, it didn't really fit very well. The ink for the sentiment will be in Hero Art's Copo Joe. Now that my sentiment is stamped on the inside of the card, I am going to glue down my frosting shaker with liquid glue. And now, because it's a shaker card, you gotta give it a good shake. I think shaker cards are some of my favorites to make. I decided the inside of my card needed a little something else. So I grabbed the Poptart image from the Lawn Fawn stamp set, Let's Toast. That's where the sentiment came from. I stamp it in pizza crust ink from Lawn Fawn. I'm then going to stamp the heart from the same set inside the Pop-Tart. I'm going to use ballet slippers from Lawn Fawn. I actually wish I would have used red because the card base is not white, so the pink is a little off color from what it should be, but it's still cute anyway. And that completes this card. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll be back with another card making video soon.